What I'd like to do in my 6 minutes is to put on the table as a contribution to our discussion, design thinking. Now, design thinking is not a new idea. It's been around for a number of years. It's been championed by folks like Tim Brown at IDEO. And I imagine many of you here know about design thinking and maybe are practitioners of it. But I think it is highly relevant for our conversation around the Horizon Report, where it's going, particularly when we bring that into conjunction, which I think really brings us all together, which is the transformation and reinvention of learning. So what I'd like to do is to put into a constellation design thinking, the Horizon Report, and the reinvention of learning, so that we can begin to see how they all will form a nexus or a constellation so that we can go forward with our true task and challenge, which is, as I said, the transformation and even the reinvention of learning. Now, the way I kind of stumbled onto design thinking was through this term, wicked problems. And it's a nice term, and it's somehow gotten attached to the discourse that surrounds design thinking, and it's a very interesting concept. So I'd like to take just a few minutes to explore what a wicked problem is and then come back to design thinking proper. The wicked problems, as the name suggests, are those sorts of issues or challenges that are of such scope that our usual and ordinary tactical techniques and methods will not avail in the face of them. So the question might be, how do you know if you're in the grips of something that's a wicked problem of that scale? Well, in the discourse, there turns out to be about 4 characteristics that are significant that kind of enable you to tell whether you're in the grips of one or not. Take any large problem, climate change, overpopulation, social inequality, whatever. You know by looking at that for even just a few moments that the causes are very, very multiple, they're multidimensional, and they have a flux to them that produces a sense of ambiguity. So causes are very important for problem solving. They provide us a kind of toehold of which to launch our problem-solving mechanism and processes. But when the processes are complex and ambiguous, sometimes it's hard to find that footing. And if you're grappling with something and you're finding that toehold is not there, then maybe what you have on your hands is a wicked problem. Also, a wicked problem will feel like nothing else that you've ever grappled with before in terms of scope and in terms of complexity. Many things that we deal with on a normal day-to-day basis have a concrete beginning and an end. However, this problem, a wicked problem, exceeds the scope of all those sorts of normal tactical issues that we confront with or work with on a daily basis. And the thing that's interesting about a wicked problem is that the more you kind of work your way into it, the more complex, the more difficult, and the more that the solutions can seem to elude you. So what's called for when you're dealing with a wicked problem is not a linear process of start to finish, but rather a circular, spiraling, iterative process that allows you to fully explore the complexities and the issues there so that when you come out with the result, it's one that's appropriate to the challenge. And finally, the 4th characteristic of what we call a wicked problem is that it's difficult to tell when it's solved. Now, for a lot of our common, ordinary problems, if you will, say, for example, you're trying to decide whether to adopt a new learning management system, or whether you're trying to outsource campus email. All those processes have fairly discrete beginning and ending points. It's also possible to say with some confidence when the problem is solved. But if you're dealing with something that the more you get into it, the more it's difficult to say it's solved, you're probably dealing with what's called a wicked problem. So what would constitute a solution to global warming? What would constitute a solution to, say, overpopulation? That is as unclear as the solution itself. Now, the interesting thing, if you think about the notion of what a problem is that it's also an opportunity. Like a coin that always has an obverse and a reverse side, where you have a problem, you always have an opportunity. So problem and opportunity are always co-present. And so learning, I would propose, is precisely a grand or wicked problem that we're grappling with, particularly where we are today, which is thinking about how can we actually reinvent, reconstitute, and transform the learning that's happening so that our institutions can fully address the challenges and the pressures they are facing today. wicked problems inspire this concept or this technique for design thinking. Typically, design is brought into a process at the very, very end of a process. So when something's been invented and then it's ready for taking out into the world as a product, say, it's sent off to the design shop to get gussied up and to make presentable for the public. Hence, it becomes a kind of a tactical flourish, if you will. For design thinking, it puts the design process at the very beginning of the process. So design thinking is a methodology that is strategic. It begins the design process at the very, very beginning of the process and grapples not with tactical issues, but with strategic issues themselves. It is also human-centered. Someone who is versed in design thinking will first study the people they are trying to serve and really try to understand what it is they are doing, what they need, and what is most appropriate to their circumstances. It's fully innovative. It's like James Bond. It's licensed to be innovative by starting from scratch and thinking imaginatively about the new possibilities. And finally, it's team-based. The design thinking process brings together a variety of expertise so that exploration of this complex and ambiguous circumstance is fully explored, bringing together all the strengths of all the team members who are associated with the project. Now, Tim Brown, in his ways of describing design thinking, talks about it going through three spaces or phases. One is what he calls ideation, and that is what he calls the sort of recognition of the problem and the study of the problem, the gathering of the information. That goes on to an ideation station, which is an iterative prototyping and solution seeking, if you will, finally going on to an implementation or taking a product to the marketplace. I suggest that the Horizon Report, the work that all of us have done for the previous 10 years and will continue to do, fall into this sequence right at the very beginning. That is to say, the technologies, the exemplary projects, the trends and the challenges that we've all discovered and shared by working on the Horizon Report is exactly the springboard into a process like design thinking, which is what we are going to need if we're going to address the challenges that face us today about teaching and learning. So this is what I'm trying to get at when I suggest that design thinking in our context, which is that transformation and the reinvention of learning, really is springboarded by the Horizon Report. Again, I'm sure many of you know a lot about design thinking, probably a lot more than I do, but if you're wondering about how to learn more about design thinking, Tim Brown has an article that appeared in the Harvard Business Review and this book that I think are very, very good introductions into the process. And with that, my 6 minutes are up, so thank you very, very much for your attention.